Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a DFS preview for the 2021 Wells Fargo Championship. Now, before I actually get into the video, I'll remind you guys there are timestamps in the description below. Also, those timestamps can be found on YouTube's progress bar. So if you're on desktop, go ahead and hover your mouse over that progress bar. You'll see the timestamps there. On mobile, you'll have to find a little knob on the progress bar. Click and drag that up with your finger. You'll see timestamps that way. But a quick description of what I'll go over, be going over tournament fact sheets, which will give us a good tournament setup and core statistics, looking at weather to give you an idea of what to expect for this week. But I highly advise always on Wednesdays to check back in with whatever weather website you like to use. Try to figure out if there's going to be a lot of wind or not. That's the biggest factor. I'll be looking at a course breakdown. We'll look at past results and target scores. We'll also go into, actually from there, we're going to be talking about the bucket system, the entire bucket system. Usually I leave strokes gained buckets off to the strategy video, but we're going to include it here. And I've also created salary buckets now too. Usually we do a salary analysis, but I've included it into the bucket system. So it's a fun way to cover that, and it's easy. And the whole purpose of the bucket system is to basically give you the best idea of which types of golfers you need to choose. News check, it's not going to be all approach guys. It's not going to be all off the tee guys. It's going to be a mix of both. Same goes with course history and recent form. Last year, last week, that's what the bucket system tries to achieve, giving you the best idea of, what's going to fit inside the top 10 this week. So yeah, again, timestamps in the description below. Let's go ahead and get into this thing. So first thing we're going to talk about, tournament fact sheets. You know what? Actually, hold up. I totally forgot about this. I mentioned this in the review video for the Valspar Championship, but I might as well do it right here. Housekeeping item. I finished one of the largest chunks of the database that I'm trying to complete in order to import to a website. So basically everything that I go through in all of this is all result oriented. I do grab some pieces of information from outside sources, like all the strokes gain stats. I currently don't have a way to do that. I'm not partnered with anybody that I can grab APIs from or anything like that. But the whole results part of it, I can put into a database now. I finally finished it this last weekend, so it's super exciting. I wanted this completed before the Masters. Obviously didn't get around to that, but I did get it done, which means I can move on with building the database that I want. I mean, I have all the pieces to build the database with the bare bones information that I have. I do want to incorporate so many more pieces to it, but I can at least add as I see fit going forward. So yeah, that's exciting. That's the very first thing. I was hoping to say I have a website for you guys in this one, but I think I'll be working on it this week. I'm not going to unveil it anytime soon, but that's the other thing that you guys can come to expect in at least the next coming weeks. And I'll include like the optimizer within that. Maybe that's a good time to do it, is the PGA Championship. So yeah, look forward to that. Those are my housekeeping items. Let's go ahead and get into the tournament fact sheets. Okay, so we are at the Wells Fargo Championship, Quail Hollow Club, Charlotte, North Carolina. All general information. Other thing to note, that the field for this tournament will be 156 golfers. It's top 65 in ties that'll make the cut. So, keep that into consideration. That is, a large number of golfers will be cut. There are 4 open qualifiers, which have already been determined. That gets updated usually on Tuesdays within DraftKings system and also in mine. So I'm only going to show you 152 golfer field as we go through this, but just letting you guys know. And then I'll also provide withdraws tomorrow in the strategy video. But also keep your eye out for that. It's a par 71 at Quail Hollow, and it's 7,500 yards. That's a beefy par 71. On average, par 71s on the PGA Tour are around 7,300 yards. So this is a full 200 yards added to that. I mean, this is a pretty decent par 72 golf course if it were ever to be one. But what this entails, we'll probably see scores closer to even par than we are going. Like, this is more of a grinded out golf course than it is a birdie fest. So if you have profiles of golfers that you know are grinded out golfers that like it closer to par, definitely consider those guys. It's not, birdies aren't going to come too easy here, so keep that in mind. Average green size, 6,500 square feet. That's pretty average on tour. One thing I always like to look at, number of holes water is in play. It says 7, but if I'm being honest, when I did the course breakdown, only saw 4. And that's primarily because some of the water is so far off target that it would be really hard to get there on some of them. And some of the holes you would be clubbing down, so you're not going to really put water into play. I mean, it would be silly to do so. But yeah, it does say 7. I'm going to say it's around 4. The big thing when it comes to these tournament fact sheets is looking at turf grass just to see what it's overseeded with. Now, when we get into weather, I'll show you what the temperatures are. But in order for Bermuda grass to actually thrive, you need 75 degrees on average throughout the entire day. That is from 12 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. Not just when the sun is up, but the entire day. And it's really close to that temp. But I also don't have monthly temperatures. I didn't look at that prior to this. I'm going to say it's probably 70% Bermuda, 30% POA. Because I do believe the Bermuda is growing. But the fact that it still says overseeded means that there are still some lingering, effects of the overseed on this grass. So you do have to keep that into account. I'm going to be using Bermuda stats. And I don't look at strokes gained putting Bermuda. I like looking at average result when it comes to Bermuda, because you also have to take into account what this is going to do for the rough, what it's going to do for fairways, that kind of stuff. It's different hitting out of those grasses. So you have to take that into account as well. And results usually have it baked in. But if you do want to look at strokes gained putting, I'm not going to hold it against you. But yeah, I personally, I'm just looking at results. You can see some other additional notes here. I'm not going to include it. I'm not going to go over it. Pause the video, read it if you want, if you're interested. George Cobb was the architect of this golf course in 1961. Tom Fazio renovated this, and Tom Fazio is known for back to front sloping greens. There are a couple of those here, so obviously he put his touch on this golf course. But a lot of this was kind of forming new holes of old holes. And kind of reshaping the land a little bit for a couple of them. So if you're interested, I definitely would suggest that you go and take a look at the renovation notes that occurred for this tournament. But the Wells Fargo Championship has been played here after the renovations have happened. So, I mean, personally, there's not going to be a pro in this golf course or in this tournament that has not played this golf course if they do have course history. Since it's been renovated. So I say if you want to use course history dating back to whenever, just go ahead and do it. There's not going to be much issue with that. But with that, let's go ahead and move on to weather. Obviously, a 10-day weather forecast, Charlotte, North Carolina. I will say this again, check back Wednesday with whatever weather website you like to use to see what the winds are going to be like on Thursday, Friday, to see if there's an advantage of picking one tee time stack over another. And honestly, only look at Thursday, Friday. Everything gets reseeded. Like everything for tee times on Saturday and Sunday are dependent on how well golfers perform Thursday, Friday. We're not going to know, so there's no point in forecasting what the weather is going to be like for some of these golfers on Saturday, Sunday. Thursday, Friday is where you want to look. And if I drill down on this, Thursday, 5 to 10 miles an hour, that's pretty benign. So obviously there's not going to be much of an effect on Thursday, but on Friday we see 10 to 15. And if this increases, I'm going to say let's see. If this goes up, I think we can predict it's going to affect more of the PM golfers on Friday's wave than the AM golfers. So I would, just by looking at this right now, again, check back Wednesday, but just looking at this now, I'd give the slight advantage to the Thursday PM golfers, Friday AM golfers. So doing that stack, and last week we saw the exact same thing. Friday's conditions were a little bit tougher, and the Thursday PM, Friday AM crew showed up inside the top 10 more than the other one did. So That's what I would give the slight benefit to right now. Again, Wednesday's the better day to really look at wind. It's just giving you an idea what to expect. Let's go ahead and get into a course breakdown. I'm not going to read what I have described for each of these holes, but it kind of gives you an idea of what to expect on those holes. I'm going to let you pause the video, read it. I'll scroll down to the back 9 here. Pause it again, read it. But what I'm more interested in is looking at the summary. So I have off the tee, holes that matter to hit a draw, only 1. Holes that matter hitting a fade, only 2. So it's not really going to matter that much what type of shot shape you need off the tee. Same applies for approach shots. This is like, you know, if there's water or a bunker tucked left, hitting a draw would be much more beneficial because it'll get you closer to the hole, not going away from the hole, if you think about that. And on DraftKings, we're looking for scores. You know, we want low scores. We don't want golfers playing it safe, although that might be the smart thing to do. We want guys making birdies. So obviously trying to figure out what the more preferred shot shape is going to be much more beneficial than just saying, oh, who cares? But the thing is, it doesn't really matter. And one of the other things we can look at is looking at past results and target scores. So when we look at past results, in 2019, Max Homa won this tournament at 15 under. He primarily hits a draw. Jason Day won this in 2018 at 12 under. He primarily hits a draw. Although he's trying to hit a fade nowadays, but in 2018, he hit a draw. 2017 was played at Eagle Point. I'm sure you've heard that throughout the industry. So it's not really worth mentioning, you know, shot shapes at this for this tournament in 2017. 2016, James Hahn won this at 9 under. I'm not sure what his shot shape is off the top of my head. I don't even know if he's in the field. Let me double check. I'm sure he is, but James Hahn, what do I have for him? Draw. He hits a draw. So definitely consider that. So James Hahn, another draw golfer. So that's 3 in a row so far that have won a tournament, winning the the Wells Fargo Championship. 2015, Rory McIlroy hits a draw, 21 under. That's a bit of an anomaly. Like, don't worry about 21 under. That is not a target score we're looking for. 2014, JB Holmes won this at 14 under. He hits a fade. He does not hit a draw. And I have no idea what Derek Ernst, what type of shot shape he has or what he had in 2013, so I'm not even going to try. But if I look and I go through some of these golfers, Mickelson can shape it both directions. He probably hits a fade, though, as a lefty, which is a draw as a righty. And that's how my shot shapes work when I do my analysis. Everything's based off a right-handed golfer. So lefty here, you flip it the other way around, his fade becomes a righty's draw. Westwood, however, hits a fade, and he's a right-handed golfer. Ryan Moore hits a fade. He's a right-handed golfer. Streelman hits a fade, I believe. Let's take a look at Streelman. I don't have Streelman's stats. Okay. I'm pretty sure he hits a fade, though. Howell hits a draw. McIlroy hits a draw. Those are guys inside the top 10. Harmon, a lefty that hits a draw, so that's like a fade for a right-handed golfer. Keep that in mind. Furyk hits a draw. JB hits a fade. Rose hits a fade. Kisner hits a draw. McIlroy hits a draw. That's everyone inside the top 10 that I know there. Draw, I don't know what Rogers hits. Simpson hits a draw. Mickelson hits a draw. You know, obviously lefty, fade, draw for a righty. Woodland hits a fade. Thomas hits a fade. Steele hits a draw. And Streelman hits a fade. Obviously, we just saw Hahn hits a draw. Rose fade. Fowler at this time hit a draw. McIlroy hit a draw. Mickelson hit basically a draw for righty. Lucas Glover, I think he hits a draw as well. So we're seeing a trend that more draws do well here, especially winning this tournament. But definitely don't take out if you have a good fade golfer, like Rahm, DJ in 2017. I'm sorry, we can't consider that because that was Eagle Point, right? This is a draw. This is a draw. This is a draw. I think Watney hits a draw. Mickelson. So maybe hitting a draw is way more beneficial here. Reed hits a draw. But I do think it's a good mix. So I definitely wouldn't stick too much on one or another, but maybe your high price guys, it might be worth focusing on golfers who hit draws more so than fades. Target score, though, as we went through this, you really didn't see anything except for Rory. That was 21 under. We didn't see anything over 15. And likewise, we haven't seen anything less than 8. So I'm going to say, the target score to win this tournament is going to be 12 under, give or take 2 strokes. I think that's pretty safe. So I think it's more of a grinded out golf course, not so much a birdie fest. I think it's, results are in the pudding. Looking at the cut, I forget to do this every once in a while, but just take this score -1. That's what the score ended up being for the cut score. So in 2013, it would have been 2 over. So it was 2 over there, 1 over in 2014, even 2015, 2016 was 1. We're going to skip 2017, go to 2018. That was 3 over, and then 1 over in 2019. So I think we can probably expect a cut score to be around 1 over. If scoring conditions are good, I'd say even. So somewhere between even and 2 over. Again, find your grinded out golfers that have trouble making birdie but make par no problem. Which I guess kind of goes in line with Team No Putt. I usually never say that kind of thing. I don't care. But, if some golfers that are striking the ball who can't score are usually making pars. But when their putter does heat up, they're making birdies. So I would definitely consider those types of golfers. But here's a great transition. You can't just say you want to look at all ball strikers all the time, because a lot of times that doesn't work out in your favor. You need to mix it up. So from here going forward, what we're going to be discussing is looking at basically the bucket score. But I forgot to mention, I'm going to be covering optimal lineups. So we'll do that right now. But what I was transitioning to is the bucket score, or the bucket system, gives us a better idea of what type of golfers we want to choose from. Obviously, we see draws matter a little bit more than fades, but let's double check to see if course history matters, recent form matters, heading into this tournament. Same goes with their finishing position from last week, what type of strokes gained, stats, finish well here, that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and get into the optimal lineups first. I'm actually going to transition to the salary page. We'll cover this a little bit. Obviously, we would go here normally, but again, it's included in the bucket system. But I do want to show you this is still a thing. We'll still go over it, but let's go into the optimal lineups. So in 2018, I only have salary stats for 2018 and 2019. I do not have it for 2017. I'm not even sure if there were any. I do know DraftKings kind of implemented contests in 2017 for golf, for the PGA Tour. But I have 2018, 2019. So in 2018, optimal lineup, 49,000, leaving $1,000 on the table. That it consisted of a 10K golfer, a 9K golfer, an 8K, and 3 7s. Usually, you see a 6K golfer inside the optimal lineup. Obviously, we don't here. One thing I also like to discuss is a realistic optimal lineup. So the realistic part means how close can we get to 50,000 and get all 6 of our golfers inside the top 10? If we can do that, that is a more realistic starting point to try to figure out an optimal lineup than leaving money on the table. My biggest argument when it comes to leaving money on the table is you invite so many more combinations of lineups to be built doing that. And just as an example, if you take 6 golfers all at $8,000, their salary can only get up to 48. Like you would only be using 48,000 of the $50,000 allotted to you. So you'd leave 2,000 on the table. Now think about every golfer underneath $8,000. You can mix and match any one of those 6 positions that you used on those $8,000 golfers, meaning the amount of combinations you can create are almost unlimited. It's so crazy. But as you can see, it couldn't get up to $50,000. The only way to do that is to roster some of the $10,000 golfers or $9,000 golfers, that kind of thing, which will limit the amount of lineups you can actually create. I know it may not seem like a lot, but trust me, when you look at the grand scope of all the lineups you possibly can create, the more money you leave off on the table, the more lineups you can create. And it gets to a threshold, obviously, where you can't create certain lineups. You know, you're going to alienate a lot of the pool if you get too low. Let's say if you used 7K golfers, that's using $42,000 of that salary. If you put a max limit on 42,000, then you can only select golfers between 7 and 6K. You know, that's probably going a little too in depth, too deep on that. But I highly suggest still trying to create lineups close to $50,000. Do not chase the gem that is the optimal lineup when it comes to getting cute. You know, because this one left 49,000. I mean, it didn't leave 49. It used 49,000. But what you could have done, instead of using DeChambeau, use Paul Casey. And these 6 golfers would have netted, that would have been 49,900. So you only left $100 on the table. There aren't many other types of lineups you can create. I shouldn't say that. If I got rid of Paul Casey, so we're not using DeChambeau, we're not using Casey, and then we use someone like Sam Saunders, we're using 47,600. Leaving $2,300 on the table is getting way too cute. Plus, there's no other 6K golfer that you can substitute with this. So, like, there's no way you can, you know, if you were to try to start here and then substitute someone around Sam Saunders' price range, you're not going to get to the optimal lineup at all. If you instead used a 7K golfer, like, say, Emiliano Grillo, you'd leave $1,300 on the table. You could sub him out with Luke List or Charles Schwartzel or, I mean, sure, Bryson DeChambeau works as well. So there's much more flexibility if you know, go that route. And I know this is just for 1 year, but I still think, you know, set your sights on 50,000. Try to use all of it up. Leaving $100 or $200 on the table is going to differentiate your lineups by quite a bit. But moving on to 2019, your optimal lineup was 48,500. So this is the territory I'm talking about. This is where it gets a little too dangerous. Yeah, it's cute. You would have used let's just go top to bottom. 2 9K golfers, an 8K, a 7K, and then 2 6K golfers for your optimal lineup here. If we were just to simply substitute this $9,500 Paul Casey for like Justin Rose, we'll go Ricky Fowler. This would use 49,600. So we're only leaving $400 on the table. But you could go from Ricky to Rose. So that would have been a possibility if these were your anchor lineups. You could have went from Damon to Mitchell. That still would have been under the salary limit. I suppose we could go from Duffner to Pat Perez. That'd be 50,000 on the button. So a lot of these can be interchangeable. And if you do go that 10, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6 route, or even 7, 6, 6 route, it provides you that many more possibilities to hitting the realistic optimal lineup. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get at with all this. I do think it's much more beneficial to chase the realistic optimal lineup as opposed to the actual optimal lineup. So yeah, you can obviously see we've seen a couple 10Ks in there now, a couple 9Ks, or each realistic optimal lineup, excuse me, had a 10, a 9, an 8, at least 2 7s, right? Well, not so much 2 7s, a 7 and a 6K golfer. And we can actually look at that salary page that I showed you earlier to show you what salaries we've seen inside the top 5, what salaries we've seen inside the top 10, which is right down here. Here's another way to look at it. These are your popular salaries inside the top 5, your popular salaries inside the top 10. 6,600 has shown up twice, 7,500 showed up twice, 7,100 showed up twice. To me, all I'm looking at is basically north of 6,500, somewhere around the 7K range, like completely, just straight 7K, and then something mid 7. Those are the 4, well, really it's really the 3 salary like starting points that I'd be looking at is kind of going in there. But this is a good transition to talk about the very first bucket we'll talk about, which is the salary bucket. Usually when I talk about salaries, I'd be on this page, but I've transitioned that over to a summary page that has the buckets in the same format that I would discuss recent form, course history, last year, last week. To me, it's much easier to go through it this way to also provide you a little bit of an idea of which salaries you can trust, which ones, to avoid, that kind of thing. As opposed to here, this kind of just really gave you a wide angle lens look at it, which is what the preview video is supposed to be, but I don't really want it to be that wide angled. But yeah, you can see average salary used on, for the winner, top 5, top 10, top 20. I don't really so much care to go through that. I want to know which types of salaries I should be going after. But the transition that I was talking about is the big difference is right here. I was just in the past, I would discuss 11K and above. Then I'd go 10, just talk about 10K range, 9K range, 8K range, 7K range, and anything in the 6K. But as you can see, the totals for each of those buckets, it's kind of big. 148 golfers over the 2 years, 2019, 2018, in the 6K range. That's nuts. That's a lot. 7K range is up there as well, but I'm not going to split up the 7K range. What I ended up doing was I combined these two together. So this equals 9. It's still the smallest bucket range, and really, I don't think it's going to hurt us, including 11K with 10K. We're still probably just choosing one golfer out of that 10K and above range. Therefore, it doesn't really need to be discussed. What I ended up doing instead of doing an 11-10 is, again, combine the 10K, went with everything else. So 10K and above, then you got your 9, your 8, your 7. Then I split it to 65 and above and below 65. Now, I know just looking at these ranges, you might not understand what the 65 plus or the 6.5 minus is, but that's exactly what I described it as. 65 and above. So it's including 6,500, and then 65 and below, or below 65. And you can already see there have been 0 instances of below 6,500. And that's why I want to create this bucket on its own, because it really is the redheaded stepchild. I'm sorry, that's a little insensitive. I'm going to take it back. So I know I don't have that many viewers where it's going to matter, but what I say next has nothing to do with redhead stepchildren whatsoever. This is the bucket that nobody likes. The below 6,500. This is where your bad golfers are from. They're all within this bucket. You can see we have 55 golfers in this bucket this year. On average, we see 40. So we have more golfers in this bucket this year than we've ever seen. In the 2 years that I have salary stats for, 2017, 2018. 2018, 2019. Likewise, we see 36. Here, let me back up a little bit. So I told you what the ranges are. I didn't tell you how I came about the ranks. The ranks come from the amount of times that salary has shown up inside the top 10 for the 2 years of analysis that I have. So it's just based strictly on the amount of times it's shown inside the top 10. That's where the rank comes from. So your number one bucket are golfers in the 7K range. The other big piece of information to look at all of this, by the way, you can read this right here. It's a little off screen, but it will also provide you a description of what these buckets are. The big piece I like to talk about is your min and your max. So this is for top 10. This entire box right here, well, really right here, is your top 10 analysis. Minimum means for the 2 years that I've done this, or that I have salaries for, we've seen, if there is something other than a 0, that means we've seen at least that many times inside the top 10 for that salary. So we've seen at least one time in both the years I have salary stats for, a 10K or above golfer finish inside the top 10, meaning it's a shoo-in that this should be another case that we're going to see a top 10 or a 10K and above golfer inside the top 10. Likewise, the 8K range has a minimum of 1. So again, that is, we've seen at least one golfer in the 8K range inside the top 10 for both years. Same goes with 7K. We've seen at least 2. And then 6.5 and above, we've seen at least once. Now we can dig a little bit deeper and look at our top 5 frequencies. So we've seen at least one 10K and above golfer in the 2 years inside the top 5. We've seen at least one 7K. So, I mean, I think that's where you start, right? 10K and above and 7K. That's where you start your lineups. The other big piece to look at all of this, success rate. So what is the success rate of 10K golfers finishing inside the top 10? What this is doing is it's looking at the total amount of golfers in that bucket and then basically dividing it by the amount of golfers that finish inside the top 10. So we can see 31% of 10K and above golfers finished inside the top 10. That's a pretty high percentage. It should give you a little bit more confidence to play a 10K golfer. I like to kind of look at this when it comes to top 10. This is the maximum ownership that I want to own anybody at. You know, like anyone that's in the 10K range at. Might not be the greatest way to do it, but I will tell you this. I think I'm going to start most of my lineups with a 10K golfer. Not all of them, but most of them. So I have no issue, you know, kind of going all in on that. So you can see the success rate for each of these buckets. It goes down the lower the price goes, and that has a large effect, or what am I trying to say here? That's largely to do with the fact that the amount of golfers inside each of those buckets also, well, it changes. You know, it gets lower the higher you go, and it gets higher the lower you go. So there's typically more golfers in these buckets for salary than there are up here. That makes sense. We see that every single week. But yeah, I like using the minimum. So like 7K, obviously the success rate isn't the greatest, but with that being said, we also see at least 2 every single time inside the top 10. So that's what I would look at. Again, you can see top 5 frequencies here. We can see cut made percentage, give you a little bit better idea of who to choose from. I mean, your 9K bucket, your 8K, and your 7K bucket, all at 50%. That high 6K bucket, 40. It's around 40%, so it's not terrible. But there is a lot of risk to be had choosing golfers from that bucket. And then 27.95 for this bucket here, which might not be the best bucket to choose from. We can see the bucket totals, average per year versus what's in the field this year. If this number is higher than the average per year, I would give it a slight boost to the success rate. Primarily because there's just that many more chances that bucket is going to finish inside the top 10 or even top 5. So keep that into account. All right, so that is your salary bucket. Let's go ahead and talk about the normal buckets that we usually do week in and week out. I usually like to start at last year, but because last year was canceled due to COVID, we don't have last year stats. So we'll start at last week stats. And as we look at this, your number 1 bucket are golfers who missed the cut the week before. So if you had a favorite golfer from last week playing the Valspar that missed the cut and you're worried about his performance, don't be. Because this is the number 1 bucket to actually produce top 10 finishers. And we have a minimum of 1, meaning why not select a golfer from this bucket? We've seen it inside the top 10 since 2013, every single year at least once. Maximum is 6, which is obviously we can only create a lineup of 6 golfers. So, I mean, you can't do anything more than that. It's right at that max. So that's pretty good. 8.58% success rate, that's also really good, especially when, the bucket on average is 48.29. If you take this success rate and you look at all the other buckets that are typically smaller, this is the one that I typically like to look at, primarily because of the range. So again, let's do a quick recap of this. This range, they're all buckets. So your last week 3 bucket are golfers from last week finishing anywhere between 1st and 20th place. And that logic goes all the way down. So last week bucket 4, golfers who finish 21st through 40th. Anywhere in there, that's where they lie for the bucket for this week. So that's how you read what the bucket system is. Now, usually your best bucket is to choose golfers who top 20 the week before. 9.22% success rate versus 8.58 kind of shows you how missed cuts really isn't that big of a deal, heading into this tournament. So do not be afraid to play anyone who missed a cut. Same goes with golfers who did not play last week. That's another benefit. Our golfers who did not play, again, we see a minimum of 1. Now, both of these buckets that I just discussed are your highest volume buckets. So we will see, I will put a guarantee on this, we will see golfers from both of these buckets inside the top 10. It's just, you have 59 that are in that last week bucket 1. Those are missed cuts and withdraws. And we have 2 in the bucket that did not play the week before. So, between the two of them, that's 104 golfers. Again, this field's only 156 golfers big or deep, meaning 50 golfers are outside these buckets. Although the success rate is relatively high based off of the volume, don't get enamored by just selecting golfers who missed the cut or did not play. You do want to select golfers out of these other buckets. And a good reason why is your last week bucket 3, golfers who top 20 the week before, a minimum of 1, but a maximum of 3. So we've never seen more than 3 golfers from this bucket finish inside the top 10. On average, we see 20 golfers per year from this bucket. This year, we only see 15. So this actually kind of lessens it for me. And I'm really only going to be selecting 1 golfer, probably, from this bucket to be in my lineups, any of my lineups. I won't select more than 1. I mean, when I do, it's going to be in 10% or less of my lineups. But yeah, that's one thing to consider when choosing lineups. And why don't we just go ahead and take a look at those 3 buckets? So I think what I'm going to do for all these buckets is select the top 2 buckets and then select the best finishing position bucket, basically, if that makes sense. So out of your last week bucket 1 golfers, let's see who the notable names are. Patrick Reed, your number 1 guy. He draws the golf ball. What a good pick. He's the only one that's 9K and above. Next guy is Emiliano Grillo, and he's the only one besides Reed 8K and above. We have a ton of 7K golfers here, so perhaps this is where we see our 7K golfer. But if you do like Patrick Reed, remember this bucket, so last week 1's, well, I shouldn't say you should remember. It is 8.58% success. I'm projecting around 5 golfers from this bucket that's going to finish inside the top 10. And that's really only looking at the amount of golfers multiplied by the success rate to get this number. So it's not a perfect science, but yeah, I think we're probably going to see around 4 golfers out of this bucket finish inside the top 10. And you can see who these guys are. The quality starts to dip pretty low, pretty quick. We only have 6 golfers that are $7,500 and above. So I'm going to make a guess. We're going to see one of our 6K golfers from here and one of our 7K golfers in here finish inside the top 10. If Reed or Grillo, finish inside the top 10, that's just adding to the bucket. But it doesn't really give me the greatest feeling for either of these guys. I really don't have anything against Patrick Reed. He is a 1 throughout each bucket. It's a pretty strong play, Patrick Reed. And again, he's the most notable guy. You can see who the other guys are here. I'm not going to talk about every one of them, but there you go. The next bucket we'll talk about are the did not plays from last week. And we're going to see quite a bit of notable names here. And it's topped by Bryson DeChambeau, $11,000. John Rahm, Xander, Webb Simpson, Rory. So we have 5 golfers, 10K and above. And if you remember, we only have 6 total 10K and above golfers. So 5 of them in this bucket. I think we're going to see one of our 10K golfers come from this bucket. And that's not to leave out JT. I really like JT. He probably has the best bucket combination of every golfer in the field. But the chances, I mean, your odds for any of, if we're going to find a 10K golfer inside the top 10, I think it comes from here. I mean, we could see 2 10K golfers inside the top 10, but yeah, I really like these 10K golfers. And if we look, our projected amount of golfers finishing inside the top 10 from this is 3.13. On average, we usually have 55 golfers in this bucket. We only have 45. So this number could even be lower, which is troublesome because you can see we have, again, 5 guys, 10K and above. Zalatoris is in this group. Finau, Cantlay. Here's another thing, too. This bucket could just over-succeed. I don't know if that's the word that I'm looking for. But it's going to perform better than projected. Perhaps in the past, we haven't seen like the good golfers that play in this tournament. Well, that's another thing, too. My brain is going all over the place. I understand that. So let's start here. The strength of field for this tournament for this year is so much higher than it's ever been for any other year. I don't really have to go back and look at all of the golfers in the field for all of those years, but just looking at this, you can obviously tell this has one of the best fields for this tournament, period. Meaning some of these buckets are going to succeed higher than they typically would. I think this is one of those buckets. I mean, it's just kind of the writing's on the wall. For 8K and above, we have 13 golfers in this bucket. Again, I could see, I could see this bucket being, this projection should probably be like 5 or 6. But also, following the bucket logic, maybe we don't select some of these guys. Maybe we're cautious of selecting, going overweight on any of these guys here. Because if this is a bucket that is, a high ranked bucket, but primarily because it's a volume based bucket, and we're only projected 3, might have to be a little cautious. If I scroll down here, you can see some of the 7K golfers, some of these high 6K. So the 6K range here, pretty weak. Just based off of the volume alone, but 7K pretty solid. Most of your 7K golfers are going to be in this bucket. A lot of our 8K golfers are here, and then obviously most of our 10K golfers are here as well. So yeah, this is probably going to show up inside the top 10 pretty easily. And then our last week bucket 3 golfers. Take a look at that really quick. We have Justin Thomas, which, I mean, he's our top guy. I like him. Max Homa's the defending champion. He's in this bucket, so maybe a good reason to play him. Hovland, Neiman. Just looking at that summary again, a projected 1. Usually we see 20 golfers in this bucket. We only see 15 this year. 9.22% success rate. I don't see more than 2 guys out of this bucket finishing inside the top 10. So you're just gonna have to choose which ones those are. I think a max of 3. So if you are going heavy on any of these guys, 9K and above, I would just avoid playing any of these guys 6K and below, or below 7K. So yeah, that's how I look at that, and that's all I'm going to discuss about the last week buckets. Let's go ahead and get into the other ones. We'll start with course history. Does course history matter at this golf course? Well, by all accounts, seeing your top 2 buckets being the best average finishing position, which is this range, obviously, again, if a golfer falls into this bucket, that means his average course history is between 1 and 20. So that means they're playing this tournament or this golf course pretty well. And then obviously 20 to 40, that's the other one. So their average finishing position is between 20 and 40. That's what this accounts for. So that's your number 1 bucket. Number 2 is 20 and below, meaning elite course history. And you can see 60 to 80 and 80 plus, those are your 2 worst buckets. So course history matters here. And we can see our minimums for buckets 1, 2, and 3 is 1. Our success rates, 26.67% out of course history bucket 2. We usually see 8.8 per year. We see 8 this year. I'm probably starting here when I'm making my buckets, if I'm creating my lineups, if I'm going to be honest. And 2, we want to select somewhere between 1 and 2 golfers. Basically, again, the minimum's 1. On average, we see 8. So that's telling you something. One of the weird things here, though, top 5 frequency, our minimum is not 1 for course history 20 and below. So let's go ahead and take a look at our course history bucket 2 golfers, because it's much easier starting with, the smaller bucket out of all of them. I'd say pick 2 golfers from here. And we have a bunch of draw golfers. I really like McIlroy this week. He's burned me so much in the past, but this is a golf course that he typically plays well at. And he has elite course history. So definitely there. Jason Day, I'm going to be a little cautious on. But if you don't like either of these 2, look at the 7K and 6K range that you get to choose from here. You could find worse. If we do see at least 1 inside the top 10, these are really good values. So keep that in mind. Definitely a good bucket to choose from. Our course history bucket 1, again, that average finishing position between 20 and 40th place. Minimum is 1, max is 4. We do see at least 1 inside the top 5 every single year. So that's something to take into account. Typically, we see 20 on average per year. We have 18 this year. So it's right around that mark. I think we can safely say we can project around 2 golfers from that bucket finishing inside the top 10. So let's go ahead and take a look at our course history 1 guys. Justin Thomas is at the top. Like I told you, he has some of the best buckets or bucket combinations. I think Justin Thomas should be on the top of your list. He's obviously the betting favorite. He's the highest salary on DraftKings. Don't be worried by that. It's a good golfer. But we also have Webb here, Finau, and Reed. We already talked about Reed and being in one of those marquee buckets. Homa as well. So yeah, we're selecting 2 golfers from this bucket. If you're not selecting anyone up top, here's some of your low price guys. Again, we're not really touching anyone below 6,500. I'm not sure I would touch Jason Duffner here, but Vaughn Taylor, you're only north of 6,500 golfer that I would be okay with, I guess. Some good 7K golfers, including Ricky Fowler. Yeah, there's a lot of good golfers here. Select 2. That's what I would say. Select 2. And since those are our top 2 buckets, I don't think I'm going to talk about any of the other buckets. Maybe I'll talk about course history bucket 3. Like looking at the top 5 frequencies, a minimum 1, a max of 1. That means we've never seen more than 1 come out of this bucket, but we've always seen 1. That's okay. That's interesting. Let's take a look at our course history 3s. And that it starts with Bryson DeChambeau, Brian Harman. He's probably in this more so to do with his 2017 win than it is anything else. But yeah, he's a decent golfer to choose from. You see Tringali's here, Lowry, Streelman, Woodland Ortiz, some good 7K golfers, and a slew of 6K golfers. So how many are actually 65 or below 6,500? So we have 12. We probably cross these guys off, not going to select from them. So really just the choice between 28 guys here. And you're selecting 1. So if you don't like DeChambeau, you've got some good fillers here. No one's really that expensive. I'm probably going to stay away from Harman, but like Tringali isn't terrible. And we haven't talked about strokes gained buckets, but as you can see over here, these are your only strokes gained bucket 1 guys in this whole bucket here. So that might be worth, a mention. It might be worth the play too. Select anyone from here. So keep that in mind. We'll go from course history buckets to recent form buckets. Your number 1 bucket is that 40 to 60 range. So again, this is your average finishing position. And my recent form goes back the last 8 weeks. So I'm looking at the last 8 weeks, average finishing position. Your number 1 bucket is between 40 and 60. So it's basically saying, probably had some good finishes, maybe a couple missed cuts, anything to get you in that 40 to 60 range. That's your number 1 bucket. And we've seen a minimum of 1 a max of 5. The success rate, not great, 6.38%. This looks to be a volume-driven bucket. 49 typically in this bucket. Each year, we see 46 this year. So pretty darn close. I'd say we can project around three golfers out of this bucket finishing inside the top 10. Your number 2 bucket is 20 to 40. Your number 3 bucket is 60 to 80. Your number 4 bucket's 1 to 20. And I would just say, just take a look at how many are in that bucket this year versus their average. Look at their success rate for top 5 frequencies. We're going to be talking about recent form bucket 4, 2, and 1. So we'll start at 1. We know this is our number 1 bucket. It's that 40 to 60 range. What can we find with that? Who is at the top? Bryson. Bryson, believe it or not, is here between that 40 to 60 recent form average. So 46 is his recent form average. Then we have Patrick Reed. So he's shown up now 3 times with high bucket scores. Obviously, he's a 1 for all of these. So what am I talking about? So yeah, Patrick Reed is standing out. Like he's kind of shouting like, play me. Not a terrible play. Sung J Im is in this bucket. Again, we're selecting around 3 guys. So you can see a lot of the 7K golfers here. Maybe you've seen some overlap with the other buckets. Obviously, Woodland shows up a bunch. Munoz, I've seen. I think Neesmith, Gooch, Streelman, Fowler. A lot of decent golfers here. How many are below 65? We have 9. So I'm really not going to select from them. You know, a decent amount of high 6K guys. So maybe this is a good, glue spot. I would consider our 6K golfers kind of, glue. Makes sense to me. Some good 7K golfers here. So definitely consider the guys that I just scrolled through. Again, we want to select around 3. Let's look at our recent form 2 guys. Tony Finau, Will Zalatoris, Joaquin Niemann, and Max Homa. Your 9K and above golfers. Then we have 3 8K golfers. Tringali's here, so another reason to play Tringali. We have Lowry, Grillo, Henley, who hurt us last week for missing the cut. But hey, again, that's not a bad thing at this tournament. So Henley might be a decent play. And the 7K range isn't that big. We see a couple strokes gained bucket 1 guys here. And then we get in our 6K. Really only 2 guys that are below 6,500. Not terrible here with your 6K golfers. So some more glue spots. And then recent form bucket 4 golfers. These are our last ones to talk about. Thomas, Rahm, Schauffele, Simpson, 10K and above. So they fit in the recent form 4. If you remember, Rahm, Schauffele, and Simpson were in the same last week bucket. Now Justin Thomas is all by himself. And when we look at this recent form bucket 4, what was our tell here? A minimum of 1. So we've seen at least 1 guy inside the top 10 every single year. We've seen only a max of 2, but we're projecting around 2.3 because of the high success rate that this bucket produces. So we're looking at around 2 guys from this bucket. Now, one thing you have to consider, we could see Rahm and Thomas finish inside the top 10. Doesn't mean you can roster them. So even if there were 2 that come out of this bucket, please keep in mind that it could be these 2 guys. And therefore, if you had a rule to yourself that you wanted to make sure you play 2 guys from this bucket, probably not the smartest idea. I've run into that so many times now that obviously it pains me to think about, and that's why I'm bringing it up to you guys, just to remind you, don't get too heavy on that. But that's going to wrap up the recent form buckets. You can see, again, 5 and 6. It's your bad recent form with no recent form. I think this number is a little misconstrued. We'll see what the 4 golfers coming in, if they have any recent form. If they don't, they'll obviously fit here. But I think the 4 empty spots that I have kind of reserved for them are being accounted here. So I don't think this bucket is as big as it is. But yeah, you can see their success rates finishing inside the top 10. We're projecting 1 out of this bucket, but I'm really not going to choose anyone that has a recent form of 80 plus. Like I might dip into it like here and there, but it's definitely going to be one of those buckets I'm going to try to avoid. I haven't been looking at, cut made frequencies or top 20, top 5 for any of these buckets. Probably should have been, but there you got that. And then our last bucket we're going to talk about is the strokes gained bucket. Now, unfortunately, I only have 1 year of data for the Wells Fargo Championship that has strokes gained data, and that's 2019. So this is just looking at 2019. But I will say this. We can typically find golfers, or I shouldn't say typically find. Every single week, a tournament looks a lot like this. Man, I forgot to fill this out for you guys. But usually this is where I would go through strokes gained buckets with you guys. And here are my rules. Pick 1 to 3. Pick 1 to 3 for strokes gained 1, strokes gained 2, strokes gained 3. Those buckets. I can show you in the summary version. They all apply the same way. Pick 1 to 3 out of these 3 buckets. Well, 4, 2, 3. Well, 4, 2, 3. Yeah. I wonder how this can be possible if we only have 2. Let's take a look. I may have not. Let's see, BX12 is what we're looking for. Top 5. Okay, no, top 10 is so we're grabbing from the wrong bucket is what I'm seeing here. So it should be BX4 or BQ. No, B total min. Okay. There, we fixed it. Perfect. I was looking at the wrong one. I was grabbing from the wrong one. So all of these are going to be the same because it's just 1 year. And obviously the total amount inside the top 10 is going to match the min and the max. But yeah, 4 strokes gained bucket 1s. And really your strokes gained bucket 1s, that is all strokes gained stats are positive. That obviously makes sense. There's no surprise there. We want to anchor our lineups with a lot of those golfers. And then it's followed by strokes gained bucket 3, strokes gained bucket 2. And you can see the success rates for finishing inside the top 10. You can see how many are in there this year versus average. Well, how is this being calculated? 13.5? BX40. That can't be right? It'd be BW. That's what we're looking for. Well, where's average? Oh. Yeah, we don't want to. So that's taken into. Okay, so it's the only time this has happened. There we go. Perfect. So you can see I'm still ironing out a couple of the wrinkles, but there we go. You can see what it looked like last year versus this year. Strokes gained bucket 3 higher than it was last year. I think, we could see around 3 golfers inside the top 10 this year. Pretty much the same number for strokes gained bucket 2, but we have way more strokes gained bucket 1 golfers. This equals 153. This equals 155. So we're taking out of some of these buckets. We're adding to basically strokes gained bucket 1. And it comes to no surprise to me, really. Seeing this here and the projections here, we want to grab somewhere between 2 to 3 strokes gained 1, 1 strokes gained 2, 1 to 2 strokes gained 3, and then fill in the rest as we see fit. Let's go ahead and take a look at everybody. So we're only going to look at strokes gained bucket 1, 2, and 3. So your strokes gained bucket 1 golfers right here. JT leading the way. Bryson, Xander, Webb, Rory. No surprise. 5 golfers again, 10K and above. We have Hovland in this group. Cantlay, a lot of expensive guys. There are only 2 7K guys here, which to me, you want to anchor your lineups around some of these guys. Again, we might see 3 golfers out of this bucket, 10K and above, finish inside the top 10. Meaning don't get stuck on the idea that you want to select one, two. You don't want to get stuck on the idea of selecting 2 or 3 golfers from this bucket. Just make sure you grab one and take into account that these 3 golfers that I selected could finish inside the top 10, and you can't roster more than one of them to get to the optimal lineup. It probably won't happen. So take that into account. I think what I'm going to do is probably 60% of my lineups will select 2 of these guys. 30% will only select 1. And that's because I'm willing to take the risk. I'm probably going to go like 10K and above down to a 9K golfer and go from there. So I'll probably select 2 golfers from here. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Usually I like to use the optimizer that I've created to kind of pilot the lineups I create and go from there. Your strokes gained bucket 2 golfers. This is surprising. This is really interesting. Corey Connors is your only 9K guy. English and Im are your only 8K golfers. And then we only have 6, 7K, and it drops into the 6K range. Our summary tells us what? 1? We want to select 1 guy from here. On average, well, I mean, we've seen 2 show up inside this bucket. I think just looking at those guys, seeing the salaries and stuff like that, yeah, I'm probably going to agree and say we probably only want to select 1 out of this entire bucket. No more than 2, though. I really wouldn't select more than 2. We can get rid of most of these guys here. So 11 guys from this bucket. We can just choose between these 14, really. And it's probably a good spot to select somebody from the high 6K range. And also some 7K golfers. But, I mean, I wouldn't sleep on Im. I wouldn't sleep on Connors. I think these are good plays. Let's go ahead and take a look at our last bucket that we're going to discuss for the night. This one is headed by John Rahm. So the other 10K golfer that was not in the strokes gained bucket 1 guys. And then we have a pretty good amount of 8 and 7K golfers. So Keegan, Watson, Lowry, Grillo, Glover, Fowler. Again, strokes gained bucket 3. This is positive off the tee, negative putting. So these are your team no putt guys. We know Rahm's usually a good putter, but obviously he's been struggling over the last, I don't even know how long. So take that into account. That's what this bucket takes into account. I don't know another word to use than that. But when we look at the bucket system or the projected amount we want to select from this, somewhere between 1 to 2. So if you are going Rahm, you are anchoring your lineups with Rahm, maybe we don't select anybody from this group. And if we do, maybe we only grab, if we are going 2 more, or if we're going 2 golfers in this bucket or more, and we are starting with Rahm, maybe 30% of our lineups, we only select 1 other guy. I mean, that's how I'm looking at it. There aren't that many low 6K guys in this range, but we do see quite a bit of 6'5 to 6'9. So maybe this is where we find our 6K golfers. Maybe. And then your 10 to 7K range right there. I don't know. I'll theory craft and try to come up with some buckets just to see what I like and what I don't like. I'll also cover some things tomorrow in the strategy video that will help us determine some of these plays a little bit better than another. So anyways, yeah, this one went an hour long, but I liked it. I mean, I wanted to cover each bucket in this video, and maybe I can figure out how to do it a little bit faster, but I mean, this was everything right at you with the bucket system. And it gave you decent plays. It gave you good ideas where to start your lineups, where to avoid some players, like not selecting too many of them. The bucket system is pretty accurate. I don't have a percentage to give to you guys, but if you were kind of scoffing at some of these numbers, like, what? No. That's stupid. I don't want to select. I'm telling you, last week it was 100% correct. And usually I see it somewhere around that. I mean, it hovers north of 80 quite a bit. So I like to start. I don't like to fully commit to a disciplined bucket lineup. I've done it in the past, like I said before. Basically, when I was going over, like, let's see here, what one was it? Was it recent form 2? Was this our small one? No. Like, if we were looking at recent form 4, like we talked about this bucket, 3 of these guys can finish inside the top 10. And the bucket system will be spot on. It'll be 100% correct, but you can't create an optimal lineup based off the rules the bucket system gives you. So even if it says select 3 golfers from this bucket, if it's these 3, it's 100% correct, but you can't build a lineup selecting those 3 golfers. So keep that in mind. But it's not to say don't select 2 of these guys or don't select 1 of these guys. Definitely do that and then go from there. You know, select some of the other golfers that you saw and move on from there. I did try to keep the shot shape up for you guys for the most part. So if you did like some of these golfers, you could see what the shot shape is with them. Again, we kind of determined that the draw was a little bit more beneficial than the fade at this tournament. Most of the winners have hit a draw, so definitely consider that. I typically cover grass stats in this preview video, but I'm going to save it for a strategy video tomorrow. So we'll look at tee time pairings tomorrow. We'll look at grass stats. We'll take a look at our statement games picks as long as it's up. And then we'll use the optimizer to see what kind of combinations we can get. You know, if we do anchor some of our lineups with these guys based off their bucket scores, where can we go from there? So I'll show you what that's like in the strategy video. But for the preview, this is a wrap. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in that strategy video tomorrow. All right, bye.